The founder of a company that distributes designs for untraceable 3D guns is selling blueprints through his website after a federal judge blocked him from posting the instructions for free. On Monday, the judge ordered Cody Wilson and his company, Defense Distributed, to remove the blueprints from the internet. Wilson says he hasn't violated that ruling. He is now charging customers who can name their own price for those designs. In 2013, Wilson became the first person to fire a bullet successfully from a home-printed 3D gun. And Cody Wilson is with us from Austin, Texas. Good morning, Cody. Let me ask you, this fight has cost you a whole lot of money and will probably cost you more in legal fees. Why are you so committed to making sure people can gain access to these files?
Well, I think it's a matter of principle. I know it's absurd to some degree to fight for your principles in a culture like this, but I think it's a worthy demonstration, and of course I could always demonstrate, like today, that I could always sell these files, and I'll continue to do so.
What is the principle at the center of this, though, that you're fighting for?
Oh, well, like state governments have no power to second-guess the decision-making of the State Department. They have no power to ask websites to take information off of the internet that's legally posted there. I'm certainly not going to consent to the judgments of judges that say that they can.
Cody, how many of these blueprints have you sold?
Oh, gosh, many hundreds. We're probably in the thousands at this point. The news was, well received.
Mm-hmm. And are you tracking who you're selling these blueprints to?
Oh, sure. I'm required to do all kinds of screening and stuff. I can only ship to U.S. persons, U.S. citizens. There's all kinds of arms export control stuff that we have to comply with. But of course, I've had many years to become comfortable and become compliant with these laws.
I mean, these blueprints allow you to make an AR-15. The AR-15 is illegal in 7 states. Will you sell blueprints of that type in the states where it is against the law?
The AR-15 is in different configurations legal to make in every state in this country, even today. So no, there's no difference. Or there's no need, really, to separate the kind of file that you can get or to somehow distinguish between the pure information that you can receive. So even if I couldn't make an AR-15 in California, which I can still have the file for an AR-15. This is a separate question of law, a separate question of fact.
Cody, recently there was a shooting at a Madden game tournament by somebody who had a history of mental health issues. Presumably they could get your file and use it. Does that concern you?
Sure. I mean, there's always the possibility that people with a history of mental illness can get access to information and somehow do something bad with it. But we live in a nation of laws, and you should prosecute crimes after the fact. This gentleman who shot up this game tournament in Florida legally bought that firearm. The law is there to prevent bad things from happening, but to do no more than that.
But Cody, after the fact here is a situation where people are already dead.
Sorry, there's a First Amendment and there's a Second Amendment. Congress shall make no law, and the right shall not be infringed. It's a pretty easy text. It's not very complicated.
Are you in favor, Cody, of gun control in any form?
I suppose it depends on what we mean, right? Like, can a community of lawmakers get together and can the public vote on things? Of course, I understand that we have institutions, we have laws, but you will have to follow those, just like I followed the order of a judge in Seattle yesterday.
But the Second Amendment, Cody, even according to Judge Scalia, is not absolute, and there can be limits on it. So it doesn't mean that you can just have any kind of firearm of any sort.
Well, I don't know. I tire of this decision-making or like this style of interpretation of laws. Like, simply because there can be limits on rights isn't somehow like an invitation to censorship or to restriction of these rights. This is not an American attitude, and I find it, frankly, like the attitude contained there somewhat suspicious.
But the American attitude is based on a judge in the Supreme Court that's a part of the American system interpreting. And by the way, Judge Scalia was not exactly soft on the original intent of the Constitution. So if he thought there could be some limits on the Second Amendment, surely he's worth listening to.
Just because there can be limits, there should be. I mean, this is the implied nature of your question. The American attitude to law is that law is there to secure the liberties, the blessings and liberties for the people, not to somehow justify restrictions and regimes of control for petty state governments like the Pennsylvania Attorney General. This is absurd.
But part of the concern that they have about the 3D printing is that you can't trace it back to where it can't be traced back. There's a case in Utah where a guy said, listen, I wanted to print this gun because I could use it. In his case, he said, for a mass school shooting, and it would be very difficult to trace it back to me. Does that concern or bother you?
I think this guy was promptly dealt with, right? I mean, when you make a credible threat of violence, you can be charged under the law and dealt with. I mean, as far as I understand, the system worked. Just because someone expresses criminal intent, that somehow doesn't mean that like the public can't have access to information, or like somehow can't go to a public library and learn how to make a gun anymore. I didn't invent that. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, in his case, he would say he was just expressing his First Amendment rights to speech, and then you're suggesting that those rights should be limited by the law. But that's all the time we have, Cody. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.